Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're exploring a truly mind-bending and incredibly detailed roadmap of exactly what happens after we take our final breath. We'll be diving into source material from Ryuho Okawa, specifically Chapter 2, which is all about a Q&A regarding the soul after death. The author presents this highly specific, structured timeline of the soul's journey. Whether you approach this as a spiritual seeker, a philosopher, or just someone curious about different cultural interpretations of mortality, the sheer level of logistical detail in this text is absolutely captivating.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's the ultimate question, right? What exactly happens to the soul when we die? Today's explainer is going to impartially break down the super intricate Q&A section of our source text. We're going to look at the rules, the timelines, and the spiritual mechanics that the author argues actually govern our transition from this physical world to the next.
The whole foundation for us today is a book called The World of Eternal Life by Ryuho Okawa. And what makes this source material so distinct is that it doesn't just offer vague, fluffy philosophies. Nope. Instead, it lays out a highly specific spiritual manual. It treats the afterlife as a structured reality with its very own set of physics, timelines, and administrative processes. We'll be exploring these specific rules objectively to really understand this unique perspective on the afterlife.
To guide us through all this, here is our roadmap for the soul. We're looking at 1. Signs before death, 2. Severing the silver cord, 3. Aging in the afterlife, 4. The fate of suicides, and 5. Brain death and transplants. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Signs before death. According to the text, transitioning to the afterlife isn't just some sudden, abrupt event. The preparations actually kick off way before a person's physical heart stops beating. And this brilliantly illustrates that timeline. Look at this. Starting a full year before someone passes, the heavenly realm actually begins preparing to welcome them back. Then, at the 3-month mark, something wild happens. The soul starts emitting what the book describes as Morse code-like signals, kind of like a spiritual beep, beep, beep to say, hey, I'm coming home soon. By 1 month prior, the soul literally starts partially leaving the physical body, which leads to these incredibly vivid spiritual experiences. You know, like when people report seeing beautiful landscapes or deceased relatives right by their bedside. And finally, at the 3-day mark, the exact date and time of passing are locked in, and the spiritual reception manual in heaven is completely finalized.
Moving on to Section 2, Severing the Silver Cord. So, the moment of passing in a hospital, when a heart monitor flatlines, that is actually not considered true death in this spiritual framework.
To really grasp this, we have to look at the concept of the silver cord, or reishusen in Japanese. The text argues that there's an actual spiritual tether connecting our physical body to our soul, originating right around the head area. Think of it basically as a spiritual umbilical cord. The author makes the case that as long as this cord is intact, the person is not fully dead, regardless of what the medical instruments are saying.
So what does the actual process of dying look like? Well, first, physical markers like heart and brain waves stop. But at this point, the soul is still fully overlapping the physical body. Next, the soul slowly floats out and just kind of hovers above the body, still connected by that silver cord. It takes roughly 1 to 2 full days for this cord to finally snap. The source material explicitly points out that this is the real reason we have traditional wakes. It's all about giving the soul the necessary time to detach naturally and completely before cremation. Rushing it, according to the text, would be a totally horrific experience for a soul that hasn't fully let go yet.
All right, Section 3, Aging in the Afterlife. Once that cord is severed and the soul successfully makes the transition, what actually happens to them physically or, spiritually in heaven? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer practical logistics of the afterlife. According to the book, an adult soul takes about 3 Earth years of preparation to revert back to their desired ideal age. But what about kids? The text states that a baby's soul still thinks and acts exactly like a baby when it crosses over. They don't just instantly transform into wise ancient spirits. Child souls actually have to grow up in heaven. It takes roughly 20 Earth years for a baby soul to be educated and mature into an adult soul over there. And who's doing the teaching? The text says there are literal spiritual nurseries in schools. They're staffed by the souls of teachers or by women who maybe wanted children in life but couldn't have them. Raising these child souls becomes their spiritual training in the afterlife.
Section 4. The fate of suicides. Here the author shifts to a much more stark, impartial explanation of what happens when a soul's journey deviates from its natural life cycle.
Contrasting these two paths, a natural transition obviously implies fulfilling your designated lifespan. The cord severs naturally, and the soul ascends to heaven. Suicide, on the other hand, is framed as a direct interruption of a soul's earthly mission. The text claims that in these specific cases, because they literally haven't fulfilled their natural lifespan, the person typically does not go to heaven. But they don't immediately go to hell either. Instead, they become earthbound spirits. They end up lingering right in the exact physical spot where they died, or they wander back to their families, often totally confused and unable to even comprehend that they're actually dead.
However, the text does add a really interesting layer of nuance here. There are rare exceptions to this strict rule. The author cites specific historical Japanese figures, like the writers Arishima Takeo and Kawabata Yasunari. Despite taking their own lives, the book claims their souls still ascended to the heavenly realms. Why? Because they lived with a profound sense of a broader humanistic mission and contributed vastly to human ideals while they were alive. It's a fascinating little caveat in an otherwise super strict set of spiritual laws.
Which brings us to Section 5, Brain Death and Transplants. This is absolutely the most medically controversial scenario discussed in the source chapter.
Looking at the spiritual perspective on modern organ harvesting, the author applies that whole silver cord rule directly to modern medicine. The text asserts that during brain death, even though brain function has completely stopped, the silver cord is still fully attached. The soul is still in the body, so from a purely spiritual standpoint, that person is still very much alive.
I actually want to read you a direct quote from the source material regarding this. It speaks of the horror and suffering of the soul of the person who is brain dead, who has not yet recognized their own death. The text issues a really severe warning here. It argues that because the soul is still attached, harvesting organs from a brain-dead patient means the spirit experiences immense, severe physical pain. Furthermore, the author even warns that the traumatized soul of the donor might spiritually attach itself to the recipient of the organ.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway is that this source material isn't just offering abstract spiritual comfort. It presents a highly mechanical, rule-bound vision of eternity that crashes right into modern life, medical science, and how we process grief. Whether you view this as literal truth or just a fascinating cultural perspective on the soul, it absolutely reframes the boundary between life and death. So, I'll leave you with this. How do these intricate rules of the afterlife change the way you view the physical world today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.